This is Wandering Universe. In this video, I'll be exploring another fascinating aspect associated with the star Sirius. I'll be discussing the mysterious connection of these Giza pyramids and its important alignment with Sirius. So, let's go exploring. This is a satellite map of the pyramids from Google Earth, and as you can see, that's where they are. This is where they're situated. It's amazing that today there's a lot of settled real estate surrounding the pyramids, whereas in Herodotus's time there was hardly any. So it seems to me there's a big difference between the images we see today and the way Herodotus described to the Giza pyramids back then in 455, 456 thereabouts BC. Because he said back then most of this was covered in some sort of acrid soil and some sand nearby. This didn't exist back then. Roads, asphalt roads didn't exist back then. So it's just an interesting comparison to the way Herodotus saw it to how we see it today. Someone did a depiction of the belt of Orion, especially the three stars right here that has a connection with the three pyramids, as you can see right there. So if that were the case, that means that there was something very significant about the connection with these pyramids that align perfectly with the three stars in the night sky. And I'm going to explain more about this. In the last video, I briefly talked about the belt of Orion and its strange connection with a variety of pyramids around the circumference of the globe. The pyramids of Giza hold a powerful geometric structure that aligns with the constellation of Orion in the night sky, Alintak, Alimnam and Mintaka, as you can see the three stars right here. Today I'll be looking to the Giza pyramids itself to find out why these pyramids are linked to Orion and to one star in particular, Sirius. So once again, this is an older photo satellite Google Earth image of the pyramids itself. Once again, it's just very sad that there's like a wave of suburbia just slowly closing in on the actual site itself, which is very sad to see right there. This is another aerial view of the site itself, and I'm going to show you a comparison of a photo that was taken in 1906. Look at that. No suburbs closing in on the actual monument itself. But look at it today. So it's quite a bit sad to see that the closer they get to these monuments, the more these monuments are going to be endangered by us in particular. But I preferred how it looked back then. It kind of added a bit of charm to the actual site itself. I'd rather see it as it is back then to what it is today. Sirius, as you well know, is a very powerful luminous star, but apart from its hypnotic brightness, one of the pyramids, Khufu, shares a geometric alignment that has spanned for thousands of years. One of the chambers right here in the Great Pyramid points directly, the shaft here points directly to Sirius. Could it be possible the significance of the entrance is to do with a home planet that was situated nearby Sirius? Could it be that? It's interesting that the main chamber, the King's Chamber, its shaft also points directly to one of the stars, Alintak, in the belt of Orion. Could it be that their home planet used to be orbiting nearby that particular star? Could it be so? Now, this is the interior structure of the pyramid itself. As you can see, these chambers and the shafts point directly towards those significant stars in the night sky for a very logical reason. They wouldn't have built these structures if they didn't know what they were doing at the time. It was mere decoration. It's not just to make it look pretty for us to be in awe about. They built this for a very powerful, significant reason. This diagram shows the entrance shaft points directly towards Sirius. What is the significance of this? Why is it necessary to have this shaft point directly towards the star? What is this strange phenomenon? and why did they build them in the first place? If this were the case, could it be possible that this shaft right here is some sort of communication interstellar pipeline to Sirius, calling their home due to the growing expansion of Sirius many millions upon millions ago? Sirius is about 240 million years old. Our sun is about 4.5 billion years old. Interesting. To calculate the distance between Sirius and our solar system is about 8.6 light years away. As you all know, there are two stars orbiting each other, Sirius A and Sirius B. This is the brightest star, Sirius A. Now, guess who's orbiting it? Sirius B. It's right here where my arrow is pointing. Someone drew this illustration about the North Celestial Pole. Now, this is the Polaris star. The North Pole is just slightly off center from the actual North Pole itself, but it does align with the Polaris star as it orbits around the northern part of this planet. And it goes hand in hand with the constellation of the Big Dipper and also Cassiopeia. I think it's Cassiopeia, this constellation right here. And the rotation of stars go that way. So it goes anti-clockwise, not clockwise. There's probably something significant about it that the pre-ancients needed to calculate the movement of these stars in order to prepare themselves and plan the structure of these pyramids before they came down here. So this is quite interesting to know. Going back to Sirius A and Sirius B, both are binary stars that are currently expanding, meaning growing bigger every year, becoming a red giant. These stars are 22 times more luminous than our sun. Knowing this background info, I'm beginning to see another side to this picture. So, as you can see, Sirius A and Sirius B. So you see the comparison of the sizes right there. The sun, our sun, is a lot smaller than Sirius A, and Sirius A, as you can see in the night sky, is obviously very luminous and very bright, and it would be incredibly hot. So you wouldn't want to land on that planet and make a home for yourself because you'll burn into a crisp in a second, and our sun would be the same. Is it possible that Sirius A was once upon a time the sun, many millions upon millions of years ago, before it turned into the current star that it is today? If these pyramids were built by the pre-ancients, beings from another planet in our galaxy, that it would have came from a planet that once sustained life with a perfect magnetic field, hold polar opposites, support water, plant life, oxygen, the right atmospheric pressure, etc., etc. I suspect there would have been a planet that was in close proximity to Sirius. Very, very interesting. Now, this is Sirius B. Compare the two sizes, they look identical, except our planet supports life, Sirius B doesn't. But as you can see, Sirius B can't support life anymore, yet it still orbits around Sirius A. And as you can see, with planet Earth, if they knew that Sirius B was also burning up and they wanted to find a planet that has the right magnetic field and the right size where it does support life that suits them, then they will look towards our planet to settle upon. Now that's quite interesting. Recently, astronomers have found a habitable planet some light years away that's very much like Earth. Okay, this is an artist's impression of the planet Wolf. It's called Planet Wolf 1061c. Supposedly it supports life. There's water, there's clouds, there's continents, there's plants, mountains, oxygen, right atmospheric pressure, etc., etc. Supposedly. They're not sure. It's a bit too far away to really be definite with their answer. But they say it may support life. But we don't know that. This is the Wolf Star 1061c. This planet, as you can see where my arrow is pointing, is orbiting around this particular star, right? There's another star that's very, very close to it, similar to that Mercury, but the size will be a lot larger than Mercury. However, it is orbiting closest to the sun. I would say there wouldn't be any life on that planet because it's getting burnt up by the sun itself. This planet, possibly, but it's still pretty close to the sun, whereas Earth is situated just perfectly in the right spot, so not too hot, not too cold, the Goldilocks space, just right. What is the mysterious pyramid connection to Sirius? Well, here's a story from the ancient Egyptian chronicle of Sirius, the mythology of Egyptian goddesses Sopdet and Osiris. Their calendar was based on the heliacal rising of Sirius and connecting deities to this particular star. This is the bust of Sopdet, representing the star Sirius. And this is just a depiction of Osiris. Orion travels across the sky on the sacred boat stars. Does this tell you that this particular god that you see right in front of you is depicting someone else that is not necessarily a god or identified as that? If you want to know where the stars are positioned, that's belt of Orion right here. That would be the Polaris star, and this would be the Sirius star in Canis Major. Sirius in Egypt was referred to as Sothis, associated with Isis, formed itself with the help of Osiris and their son Horus, the all-seeing blazing eye as Sirius. This is an amulet that depicts Horus, the all-seeing eye. If you take away most of the stuff that you see underneath the eye and also the eyebrow right here, it kind of looks a little bit like the Eye of the Sahara or the Rikat out in Mauritania, don't you think? What gets me is this: how can two women give birth to the same child? Go figure. Anubis is another star that the Egyptians held with high regard, as it is the dog head of death. That's Anubis, that's Thoth. Now, do not compare this Anubis that you see right here to the one that you see in the TV series Stargate, okay? It's got nothing to do with it. There is no association. There's no alliance to it. Its destinies are completely different. So please, I do not want to rant on about Anubis and his end goal of complete destruction of all the other gods around the universe so he can be top dog of the universe itself, okay? I don't want to talk about that. To help the dead be remembered, I'm talking about Anubis here, not forgotten for whom they were or whatever they left behind, and passed on for humanity to learn of this person from a king or queen, loyal subject to whoever, and his companion is Ashina. This is the only photo, or should I say drawing, I found of the very goddess herself. She looks more Assyrian, more Persian. I'd say she's more associated with them than what it is with the Egyptians. Maybe the Egyptians just took it and made it as a symbolic identification for themselves for whatever reason. But this is the only illustration I found of Ashina. She's also a derivation of the Indian goddess Ashtar and Asha, which represents Easter around March, April time. Remember when I said in my previous videos that Sirius is referred to as a rain star, a water symbology for water and soil fertility? Sirius brings life to the planet by providing water to fertilize the soil to make the seeds grow into harvest, while Anubis brings the end of the crop season and makes the plants wilt and die to bring in new seeds and to replace the old plants for a new harvest. This is called recycling of life. Out with the old, in with the new, and the cycle repeats itself. This is a photo of the annual Nile flooding that happens between August and September during one of the hottest times of the year for them. So the water, this is not rain, this is the actual tide flowing into the Nile, and it floods right up past the coastal edge of the Nile banks. This photo was taken, I think, last century, of how high the river tides, the water level can rise. It doesn't necessarily flood the bottom base of the pyramids. It just goes right to the bottom edge and plateaus near the coastal edge of the river right there. What's interesting is that Herodotus said the same thing when he saw it in his time, that the rise of the river Nile doesn't go all the way up to the bottom edge of the pyramids itself. It just plateaus near the cliff edge right there. He said, and he was told by his priest tour guides, that the Nile did flood right into the bottom land or the bottom edge of the pyramids. It actually went inside the pyramids. And then when the annual flood subsided, then the water went out and back into the normal flow of the river. So that was interesting that he was told that by the priests. And what happens after a good annual harvest? What do you get? A farmer's market. Now, going back to the previous topic. This explains why for thousands of years after the pre-ancients made their mark on planet Earth, that these cultures then went about cultivating their own societal claim through passed down stories of Sirius. It seems to me that these cultures, including derived from ancient Egypt, celebrated the annual summer rain, good harvest festival around the celestial equatorial circumference of our planet. This is a hieroglyph. It's about 1200 BC. It just depicts what I just said earlier, how they have a good annual harvest, all thanks to the flooding of the River Nile between around the end of July right until about September. This is supposed to be Cyrus, the Nile water god, that brings in the actual flooding per each year. So this is a hieroglyph that represents that. This is a hieroglyph that represents Hapi, the early Egyptian god of flooding the Nile. They look like twins. It's not necessarily depicted as one person. It looks like it's identified as two people that do the hard works of bringing the flooding to the Nile. Yet to me, Sirius linked to the pyramids was far more than just that. It's a communication signal to their home world. The way I see it, if these astronomers are telling us that our sun is expanding and will burn out Earth in about 1 billion years from now, well, we've got plenty of time between now and then to find an exit strategy. That is, find another habitable planet just like Earth, if the temperature is just right for us, and it was probably just right for them. What's interesting about this diagram right here, that's the North Pole, that's the South Pole. These are the trade winds. Now, along the equator here, the trade winds only go in one direction. They go anti-clockwise. Whereas up in the northern region, the trade winds go anti-clockwise, then clockwise, then anti-clockwise. So it goes in a cycle, including the higher you go to the North Pole, the tighter the trade winds are, according to this diagram where the arrows are pointing right here. Now, down here in the south, the same happens right there, except it possibly goes, well, should I say, it goes in the opposite direction. So what's interesting here, where it says rising moist air, which brings in the rains, and it only has 2 seasons per year, which is the wet season and the dry season, according to the tides and the trade winds, where it goes in one direction, brings in good annual rain. So this is just an example of how back in the Ice Age, the Younger Dryas, and going back to the pre-Ice Age before that, I'm not talking about the Younger Dryas, I'm talking about the pre-Ice Age before that, the continents of Africa, Egypt, Arabia, so they're called the ancient Sahara, would have been covered in beautiful forests, lush greenery, and there would have been a lot of lakes, rivers, streams, and there would have been beaches that surrounded the coastal region. So if the pre-ancients lived along that region and settled along there for a long time to do whatever they wanted to do, whether they wanted to wander around the place, whether they wanted to do their expedition research, whatever it is, it would have been a perfect climate for them. That means that these pre-ancients did have a planet that circulated around Sirius as their sun, expanded over the billions of years and burned up their home planet and came to ours as their exit strategy. So it's possible that that's what they did. They settled along the equator and built the pyramids to message their planet to settle here for whatever amount of time for temporary accommodation. And where did they settle? Right along here, because the atmospheric pressure was just right for them. So this is what they built along that area. As you can see, one of the pyramids, Khufu. So they built these interior chambers and they built these shafts to use as like some sort of communication station. Now, if you have a look at it closely, to me, it looks a little bit like, I'll just say this, just a little hint. It looks a little bit like a nuclear power reactor. I know it's a bit weird, but I'm just using it as a hypothesis because they wouldn't have these chambers right here that would look a little bit like a nuclear reactor, that they put these ion rods in order to heat up the reactor and add water to it. That generates a little bit of hydroelectricity. Possible. And the turbines would have been down here. But that's another video. I'll talk about that in a future video. But could it be that they built this depicting that? I don't know. Someone did a geometry drawing of the main pyramid. And as you can see, it's geometrically aligned from the equator pointing towards the horizon and the apex pointing towards the position of our sun. They needed the sun in order to generate power. They went inside the shaft into the main chamber and also right down to the Queen's chamber. How interesting. And the way they built it had to be perfectly aligned on all 4 sides. Some say it's 8 sides, some say 4. I'll let you decipher that. But one of them says this one is 30 degrees north, this one is 30 degrees south perfectly. I've shown you this illustration in one of my videos about Herodotus and his travels to ancient Egypt. He talks about the causeways, as you can see in this picture right here. The causeways are built right at the bottom entrance that lead towards the bottom entrance of each of the pyramids. In his time, he was told, and he actually saw, that the walling, the inside walling and possibly the outside walling, was covered in some sort of polished marble in a myriad of colours. Could be black, white, blue, red, yellow, whatever. But what he said is what he saw. And the way I see it is that these causeways, if there was polished marble there at the time, needed water to flow along at a fast rate in order to get inside underneath the subterranean chambers of each of the pyramids for a particular reason. It could have been a cooling system. Think about that for a moment. But that's what he saw back then. Now, he didn't see any water in there. Did he go inside those chambers? He possibly did. But he didn't see any water inside there. It's all dried up. But it is possible, through his imagination and his observation, that these polished marbles were designed and fitted so that way water can travel at a fast speed in order to enter underneath the pyramid to activate something. The mechanics within the pyramid decide to activate something. Quite interesting. This is a thermal image of the Great Pyramid itself. This is just an example of the temperatures within the pyramid itself. The hotter it gets, as you can see in red, it means that it's quite warm and toasty on the inside. And the lower it gets, the temperature there is quite mild to cool range. So it's just right. I believe, as you've been told in many videos about the pyramids itself, how they were constructed, how they were put together, you all know that every brick that was laid is very tight knitted, very closed in. You can't even put a pin in the gap. It's impossible, not even a hair. There's a reason for that. Inside the pyramid, they had to keep everything airtight. No gaps, no air to escape. I'm not talking about oxygen, I'm talking about heat. They had to keep the temperature inside the pyramid very warm to hot for a good reason. Otherwise, they couldn't use those chambers like a nuclear reactor in order to generate some sort of powerful energy that went out into space and then circulated back down, pointing down through the apex of the pyramid right here into the reactors within, encased within the pyramid itself. And the water would have been used to adjust the temperature within, so that way it doesn't blow. Okay, so I kind of just comparing it to like a nuclear reactor, but I'll talk about that in a future video about that. So if this ancient Egyptian mythological story were true, stripping away the superstition and fantasy fairy tale, you begin to see the true aspect of the story. But who were these pre-ancients? I doubt they were acting as gods. That would be their egos talking. It is possible that they were called Isis, Osiris, Horus, Anubis, and Sheena as their identification tag. But did they identify themselves by those names? I wouldn't think so. This is a hieroglyph depicting the gods themselves. Now, for argument's sake, the pre-ancients that came and settled on Earth for a very long period of time, did they actually call themselves by the Egyptian god names? I don't think so. I think they were called something else entirely different under another language that we don't even know what it is, right? Figure that out for yourself. Something fascinating about this picture. Take a closer look. Go on, have a good look. Every single one of them represents an astronaut wearing an astronaut uniform. Not those baby suits that you see the astronauts on today's space shuttle. I mean, they could do better than that with that technology. But every single one of them is wearing a helmet, some sort of microphone, some sort of glass eyewear casing around their face, their uniform, and they're riding inside a shuttle pod. This one has a TV screen. This one looks like is seated and is at the steering wheel, steering the shuttle pod. This one, even though it looks like a snake, it's actually the outside casing of a shuttle pod. And this looks like joysticks, so it's actually driving the vehicle. Same with this one as well, driving the vehicle. And if you imagine in the TV series Enterprise and the TV series Star Trek, they have control panels where they type in the coordinates, type in the measurements, whatever they're searching on the ground. And what's interesting is this one has a little handbag. I know, it's quite cute. Looks a little bit like a Louis Vuitton bag, but it's not. Now, why is it that you see in some stone carving hieroglyphs that they're carrying a handbag? I know what it is, but I'm not going to tell you that right now. I'm going to leave that for a future video. Someone with their imagination, thanks to them, imagined how the pre-ancients may have looked like when they settled in Göbekli Tepe, where they built the actual structure itself. These people would have been very strong, very fit, very healthy, and highly intelligent. They brought over the technology that they've used on another planet where they came from, and then recreated it here on planet Earth. So someone must have thought that they looked a bit like us, maybe, but had a higher intelligence because they had bigger brains, I'd say they had. And also that these people were very philosophical and very rational thinking people. They weren't depending on their emotions and their ego so much. So they had very balanced minds and they were very patient people. You've seen this one before in my Göbekli Tepe videos. Please go right ahead and have a look. This is a statue of an alien. Looks a little bit like one of the characters from Star Trek. If you look at the uniform carefully, it looks a little bit either Captain James T. Kirk or Dr. Spock. One of them. But it looks very similar, don't you think? And the way it's standing as well. It's obviously holding something in its hand. I don't know what it is. It could be a contraption, could be a computer device. I don't know. But it just reminds me of one of the crew from Star Trek. Can't help getting curious, can I? They would have spoken an entirely different language that is unheard of today, let alone translate into English. Good luck. But from what we know, they are far more highly intelligent than we are due to their quantum technology that goes far beyond our comprehension. What I'm saying is, if you do the math, the age of Sirius and our sun, that these pre-ancients are actually close to 500 million to 1 billion years old. What does that tell me? It means that we, us humans, have a very, very so freaking long way to go. The pre-ancients are the great-great-grandparents of ancient times. We're just babies to them. That's how they see us, and yet, for thousands of years, we've been adorning them, praising them, under the false pretense of superstition. It should be said that we, us humans, should be using our time wisely, studying the pre-ancients' persona well, identifying who they truly are, and where they came from, what language they spoke, and why they left behind these magnificent structures on Earth. As the old saying goes, do not squander time. It's the stuff life is made of. That's all for now.